Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Cutter Top 10 Sports video. And today, grabbing the Toronto IndyCar shirt, because it's an IndyCar episode. And this will be the top 10 Indy 500s in history. For NASCAR, I talked about the Daytona 500. I talked about the Formula One Monaco Grand Prix being the crown jewel. And now for the third discipline of racing, it's the F1. Wrong, it's the IndyCar version of it. There have been some great moments in history. One massive honorable mention is Danica Patrick in 2005 qualifying for the Indy 500 and actually leading some laps. But obviously she didn't win. All right, here we go. Number 10 is the 2016 Indy 500, in which Alex Rossi won the 100th running of the Indy 500. I know you'll be confused because a lot of the purists would say, oh, it started in 1909. Why is it 100 years, 2016? Well, due to the fact that you couldn't run the race pretty much during World War One or World War Two. You know, you had to lose some years eventually. But yeah, the 100th running was huge. And like rookies winning the Indy 500 were rare. I think only like two or three in history. But Alex Rossi from California, yay. Well, must be from Italian heritage because, Rossi is Italian. But anyway, Alex Rossi shocked a lot of people by having a great race strategy and winning the race as a rookie and doing it in 2016 and making things happen. I think he's won one more Indy 500 since. I might be wrong, but anyway, yeah. Number 9 is 2006, in which the Andretti curse reared its ugly head. Now, for a lot of you people don't know what the Andretti curse is that it's plagued a racing family. Mario Andretti is one of the greatest drivers around, IndyCar and F1. And, his son Michael also was a good driver, and so was Marco Andretti, the grandson of Mario and the son of Michael. But the Andretti curse is that, only once has an Andretti won the Indy 500, and practically either Michael or Mario or Marco get themselves into deep trouble with a race and bad luck and all that. And 2006 was huge. Marco Andretti had the lead with 2 laps left and seemed destined to break the Andretti curse. But somehow, in some way, just feet before the finish line, Sam Hornish Jr. put up a clinic and actually beat him to it. In fact, it was the first time ever in Indy 500 history that there was a last lap, last corner pass for the win at Indy. Unbelievable. Almost 100 years at that event, and that was the first time it ever happened. Like, if you made a last corner, you were going to win. There have been a few tight ones, but anyway, Sam Hornish won it. Michael Andretti was almost there too. Number 8 is Voigt's fourth in 1977. I know you could say Julio Castroneves should also be there because he's a 4-time winner, but no. AJ Foyt is a legend in IndyCar racing, American racing in general in the 60s and 70s. No Indy driver ever had won more than 3 races of the Indy 500, and AJ Foyt became the first in 1977 to do so. He actually had to deal with a race filled with crashes and mechanical failures. With 17 laps to go, he managed to take the lead and cruise to victory, cementing his status as one of the greatest IndyCar drivers ever. He has been he has to share with that mark with Castroneves and a few other people on this list. Number 7 is the famous spin and win from the year of my birth, 1985. 1985 was a big one, as Kevin Cogan. No, it wasn't the one. But anyway, Kevin Cogan, I think, was the pole sitter in 85 and failed. But anyway, Danny Sullivan's 1985 victory is the stuff of racing legend. While chasing Mario Andretti for the lead, Sullivan spun out at high speed. And usually that means he's going to crash. But somehow, in some way, he missed the wall. He managed to keep the car running. He spun, missing the wall by inches, and no one crashed into him. He recovered. He managed to make a big 360-degree spin and still keep his car on the track and cause no accident to himself or the other drivers. But Sullivan would have another chance to get Mario Andretti for the lead, and he did. He passed and won, according to the phrase spin and win, because it was drama, luck, and skill, which made this race unforgettable. Number 6, Rick Mears cementing his legacy to get the 4 titles, Indy 500s, in 1991. Rick Mears was a legendary racer and all that. He was trying to tie A.J. Foyt and Al Unser Sr. for the most victories at the Indy 500 with 4. No one else has ever done that. I thought Johnny Rutherford did that, but no, I guess not. But nevertheless, Rick Mears cemented his legacy. He would duel Michael Andretti in the closing laps, and their wheel-to-wheel racing stunned the crowd, as Mears would do a daring pass on Michael Andretti, winning his 4th race at the Brickyard and solidifying his reputation as one of the Brickyard's greatest drivers. It would be a few years later that Rick Mears would be immortalized on TV on Home Improvement in an episode in which the boys, Brad, Randy, and Mark, spend their money on they get a race car, they get a remote control race car of Rick Mears and his Indy car instead of buying baseball cards. But anyway, the boys take the car out for a spin and gets crushed and all that. And Tim, of course, is devastated because, the boys were playing with that thing and it was a collectible. All that. But anyway, yeah, that's how I remember Rick Mears. Number 5 is my boy, Jacques Villeneuve, 1995, winning the Indy 500, but under suspicious circumstances. Well, if you're Scott Goodyear, it's suspicious. If you're Jacques Villeneuve, it's like fantastic circumstances. We all know about the IndyCar fans will know about the end of this race and why it was high drama. But the fact is that Jacques Villeneuve not only won the race the way he did, but he had to endure a massive 2-lap penalty. He had sped in the pit lane and had to take a penalty. He was down by 2 laps, but thankfully, due to crashes and some daring maneuvers, Jacques got himself onto the lead lap and could challenge for the lead. And he was in second place when Stan Fox, I think that's the guy's name, crashed, and then it would be, the pace car and, your speed. And then once the pace car goes into the pits, then it's racing the green flag. But Scott Goodyear tried to anticipate Jacques Villeneuve getting on his rear, so he ended up passing the pace car before it pulled into the pit lane, which is a no-no. If Goodyear had sped past the pit car and the pit car was in the pit lane, like the pace car, then it's fair game. But Scott Goodyear bobbled it. And thanks to that mistake, Goodyear had to take a stop-and-go penalty, but refused. His team told him to stay on the track, but he would fall to 7th, I think, by racing. And Jacques Villeneuve won it. So Scott Goodyear was pissed, and for good reason. But the good news is there was a Canadian winner of the Indy 500, the only Canadian winner of the Indy 500. Hinchcliffe hasn't done it, but yeah. Jacques Villeneuve became the first and only Canadian to win the Indy 500 because if Goodyear had been clean, if it was Goodyear and Villeneuve, it would have been great for Canada, a 1-2 finish. But the good news was that, Jacques Villeneuve is there. I am biased towards Jacques Villeneuve because he is a birthday twinsy, if you will. He was born the same day as I was. Well, not literally the same day, but his birthday is April 9th, like yours truly. So, it was amazing. But yeah, that win actually got him to the stratosphere and got F1 to notice him. I mean, Jacques, I think, was trying to get into F1 because his father, Gilles, was a F1 icon. But yeah, by 96, he was in F1. He was with the big boys, if you will. Of course, IndyCar had that massive split, and Jacques got out of the way. All right, number 4 is Dan Wheldon winning on the last lap. Now, rookies usually don't win. Well, I talked about Alex Rossi winning in 2006 and how there were a few rookies who had a chance, like Marco Andretti, but no. In 2011, it was one of the biggest moments. J.R. Hildebrand, Number 4 in your programs was on course for a Cinderella victory. He was winning the race on the final lap. And then somehow, in some way, Hildebrand crashed into the wall on the final turn and limped towards the finish. He was ahead by a certain amount of seconds. And Dan Weldon, who was in second place, the Englishman, swiped first place from him. Hildebrand somehow managed to get his car upright and crossed the starting line, meaning that he took second place, which is like, when most people crash, they crash and they don't even finish the race. At least he finished the race. Now, there was good reason why he crashed the wall. He hit the wall. It wasn't because of debris. It was the fact that Hildebrand was trying to avoid a lapped car and unfortunately slid into the right-hand side. I don't know who was at fault, that lapped car, but yeah. Hildebrand was trying to pass somebody who was lapped, and, he ended up crashing. This would be Dan Weldon's last Indy 500 win. I don't know if it was his last IndyCar win, because I know that, unfortunately, later that year in Las Vegas in 2011, that's when Weldon had that massive crash at Las Vegas Speedway, and everyone criticized why IndyCar would go there because you know how high speed Las Vegas is. Weldon lost his life when he went airborne at a sickening pace. If you watch the footage, it's sickening. There were some online rumors that fans of J.R. Hildebrand had wished ill will on Dan Weldon, but that is sickening. But no, Dan Weldon, is just sad that his Indy 500 win came under weird circumstances, and then later in the year he was dead. I don't know. Number 3 is the sprint to the finish between Gordon Johncock and Rick Mears. Speaking of Rick Mears, in his greatest finish of all time, to face Johncock. It was a nail-biting finish. The 82 edition was amazing. The finish was huge. But let's not forget that the 82 race started terribly as Kevin Cogan infernally and somehow veered to the right and crashed into a couple of cars. And all that. People thought that Cogan had done it on purpose, but it was just his inexperience on the track and all that ruined the race at the start. But they started in 1982, and then Johncock and Mears were battling each other. Johncock had the lead with 2 laps to go. Mears was nipping him, but failed. Johncock held his line and then won by 0.16 seconds, or sixth of a second, if you will. They had brave passes, raw speed, and electric atmosphere with more than 400,000 fans on their feet. Number 2 was Mario Andretti's championship in 1969, the Day of Triumph. Mario Andretti was a racing true legend. Came over from Italy as an immigrant to be in the United States to race and to live the American dream. It's kind of like Bruno Sammartino for wrestling. But anyway, Mario Andretti in 1969 shocked a lot of people. He actually crashed during practice and had to drive a backup car. But somehow, in some way, the backup car held on and he dominated the race, winning the race in 1969. And it would have been great. Everyone thought, okay, well, Mario will win a few more Indy 500s. Little did anyone know that would be the only time Mario Andretti would win a title. Heck, it's the only time an Andretti had won an Indy 500. The Andretti curse would plague the family for decades, such as 2006, like I said. Mario did claim his place in Indy immortality. And finally, number 1 was the closest finish ever in 1992 between Alonso Jr. and Scott Goodyear. Boy, you gotta hate being Scott Goodyear. You're twice on this list in a negative light. Nevertheless, 92, it wasn't just for the finish. It was just the fact that, the start of the race was huge. Roberto Guerrero, who was on a part-time schedule, was the pole sitter, and then somehow, before the formation lap, he managed to crash into a wall and his car was broken. And if you see the footage, you see some guy laughing in the background. And it was like, that's pathetic. But yeah, it was due to the fact that Indy was bitterly cold, more so than normal, on that day before Memorial Day 1992. It was a treacherous track, bitterly cold. Roberto Guerrero crashed out, and 12 more cars crashed by lap 12. It's 200 laps, but by lap 12, you lose 13 of your 33 cars. Amazing. But nevertheless, the finish was one for the ages. Al Unser Jr. and Scott Goodyear were side by side in the closing laps. Goodyear was coming up on Unser Jr., and Unser managed to block him and held them off by decimal 0.04 seconds. And they got it right when they said, I believe it's the closest finish ever, closer to the one 10 years ago. Which was right, because 1982 was won by decimal 1.6. Goodyear and Unser were by 0.004 seconds. Can you imagine that? Unser did have a Victor Lane interview and says, you just don't know what Indy means. And it became a defining moment in Indy folklore. Folklore, Jav. So yeah, 92 was just amazing. It denied Canada an IndyCar win, an Indy 500 win. But, we got it back 3 years later. So that's what happens. IndyCar just rocks and all that. Really, it does. Anyhow, Jeff, I'm going to do.